Hey, what's up, everybody? It's K-HiSox, the Rap Hippies. Got desiiTee here, and we have a very, very special guest during this quarantine. We have this kind of quarantine series going on, but we have none other than Asher Roth.
What's up, guys?
So, Asher, this is a crazy time we're going through right now. What exactly are you doing to kind of get through everything right now, like in this pandemic? How's it affecting you?
Oh, it is kind of crazy. I actually want to ask you guys because you guys have kind of wild. You're in Georgia, right? You're in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I know some of the state issues and like weird conversation around what's happening in Georgia. So I was actually curious, first and foremost, like how are you guys doing down there?
I actually want to ask you
It's
guys.
it's crazy. We have a governor that is doing his thing, to say the least. Yeah, basically, not really adhering to what a lot of the other states are doing. But what's actually kind of good that I feel that a lot of people are doing is they're not really listening to him. They're kind of like, even though he says, "Hey, go out there and go to the bowling alley," like, why does anybody need to go to a bowling alley right now? But nobody's really doing that. So people are kind of still like staying, sheltering in place or whatever. So thankfully people are kind of using their heads, even though our governor is not.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what it is. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I read is kind of like, it's not a, like it's an educated decision, and it's an educated decision in saying economically that, the economics are more important than lives, or whatever it may be. And, I follow some of the conversation that Killer Mike has and the Run the Jewels stuff. And I actually didn't know that Georgia kind of had its own thing going on as far as the rollout, so to speak, of the quarantine. Cause I'm here in Philadelphia and it's, I don't think Philly is as like, active as Atlanta is. It's a little bit mellower of a city. It's pretty segregated in regards to like, South Philly, West Philly, North Philly. And so people pretty much stay in their pockets as is. So it's not really super crazy here in regards to people freaking out, because I think for the most part, this city's small enough where people can get around by foot or bicycle. I mean, obviously things change a little bit with SEPTA and stuff, but for the most part, from my experiences, as of late, it's been pretty mellow. People are adhering to the rules, but like I said, I noticed that Georgia was starting this like, yo, we're gonna try to liven this back up, and I was just kind of curious, a firsthand experience of what you guys are experiencing. But it sounds reassuring to know that people are thinking for themselves down there, which I think is really, really important in a time like right now.
Yeah, it's scary because I'm not sure what's going to happen now that they're saying that the malls are going to start opening come May 1st. That's next week.
No, that's
right.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing. That's a bigger place for jobs, and then people want to shop, people want to get out. So I'm kind of curious to see how people, if they're still going to do the stay-at-home thing, or if they're just going to have to take heed to it because of money wise. You know what I'm saying? Their jobs might be like, y'all got to work now, and then they come, and then the people who have been stuck in the house who might just have the need to do some shopping or whatever. That's what I'm curious to see. But as for us, our team, our circle, our friends, and a lot of our music industry people that are here in Atlanta, we are staying inside until something changes. So there's no change for us. We don't have any, look into any event or partaking in any type of party or media event or listening thing. We're going to keep our asses in the house until, we actually see a change, and not for economic reasons.
Yeah, I mean, when I spent time in Atlanta, I was down there early on. That's kind of where we launched the greenhouse effect and everything like that. And, I think what's made Atlanta so amazing in the first place is its sense of community and togetherness, and like what's allowed it to kind of do its own thing, because, you know, a lot of these successes and these success stories in the industry happen on coasts, you know, like New York and Los Angeles. And Atlanta specifically has been able to be an epicenter for so long because people are in it together, like down there. So it's good to hear that too. It's just scary because there's so much misinformation and so much like nobody really understands or knows what's going on, and then kind of just throwing Georgia out like, okay, you guys are up. Like, it's just
Exactly.
like, wait, hold up. So now I was just curious how you guys are feeling down there, but here in Philadelphia, it's kind of the same thing. We're just taking it day by day.
Yeah, that's all you can do at this point. So,
Right.
but so yeah, like that's good that you guys are, you know, staying safe, and you managed to put out a project within this time.
Right.
You know, a lot of people are doing, you know, you have flowers on the weekend, and it's a really different feel for, you know, how people usually, you know, would associate Asher Roth, and it's really dope. But I have to ask, does your girlfriend bring you flowers on the weekend?
Yeah, she is. She's here too. I mean, that's kind of the influence of just that song in general. When we started hanging out, yeah, she was working in Chester County, which is a little bit away from Philly, about 30-45 minutes. So she would spend the week in Chester County, and then on the weekends would come, and she'd usually have flowers. Now, they weren't necessarily specifically for me, you know, they more so just for the dwelling and making sure that there was life in the house. But you know, at the same time, they are kind of just like you know, little mementos that just say, hey, I care, you know. And I think it's just one of those things that regardless whether they're flowers or whatever, however you use your language to let somebody know that you're thinking about them is important in a time like right now.
Absolutely. Big time.
Yeah. But going into that, my question for you is like having a song like that in a hip hop space, and like, what's your take on masculinity within that space? Because, you know, being a man and getting flowers on the weekends, or it either be to have life in the house figuratively or, you know, literally, how do you feel about that? You know, because in hip hop, in that space, you know, you're not really going to hear that a lot, you know, of somebody bragging of that. But I commend you, you know, because it's I get it. I have plants. I've gifted males with plants, you know, and vice versa, because I do believe in life in the home. But, you know, to hear that in a song, I want to know, like, what's your take on that and like masculinity and whatnot?
That's fun. I mean, for me, it's a little bit different, right? Like, these are my own personal experiences, and everybody kind of has their own. But, you know, I grew up with 2 older sisters. My dad has 4 sisters, so even he says being raised by she-wolves, you know. So you know, that's always been something that's in my life, as just far as like being in touch with the feminine, you know. And I also think it's really important now, whatever people may classify as feminine qualities or masculine qualities, however people might categorize them, I think now is an important time to be a little bit more compassionate and sensitive and kind of understanding of what other people are going through. And so I know that typically is filed under like femininity, but for me, I just think that they're endearing qualities of what actually make up someone's real identity, like those characteristics, rather than, you know, I'm white with blonde hair and I'm a banker and you know, and that's how we've been, and I make X amount of money per year. That's how we've been categorizing and characterizing ourselves with our identities. Whereas for me, it would be nice for people to start saying, hey, I'm honest and I'm attentive, and you know, I care, or whatever it may be. So that's what I would like to start having be part of identity, whether they be masculine or feminine, rather than and part of identity rather than, you know, what you do for a living and what you look like.
Absolutely, because usually when people say, "Oh, tell me about yourself," people always start off with what they do.
Yeah, and like, I get it, because in being in entertainment, it's a weird time for me now, right? Because I've been in it now for 12 years. I'm in my 30s, and it's like, for me, my priorities are changing. You know, I think when you're young, you can be a little bit more reckless. You can have a little bit more fun. You're not thinking of other people as much. You're pretty much, you know, driven by your own stuff. You know, and as you get a little bit older, you slow down a little bit, and like, it's not as like sexy or fun to be like talking about honesty and sensitivity, you know what I mean? But these are, if we're playing the long game, you know what I mean, and we're trying to become better people and spread love for what it's worth, like these are things that we have to practice. And if you're moving a mile a minute and trying to impress people with all of these other things, it can get really tricky. So, for me, it is tough because in a world where kind of the lowest common denominator is sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all of that jazz. That's what gets people, spark controversy. That's how you sell records, and that's what makes successful. It's tough for me because here I am, shining a light on, what Des was saying, and like, more sensitive, feminine feminine quality conversations. And I don't know if that's going to be quote unquote successful, but to me, it's where I'm at and it's truthful. So I feel comfortable with what we're up to.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So with Flowers on the Weekend, what were you trying to get across in this project?
I don't know if there was any real intention. I think the coolest thing is that we made it with my boy Rob Deckhart in one place with a group of people. So the continuity, the flow, the record from top to bottom being something that you can listen to, that was relatively purposeful. And it's because of where and how and who we made it with. I think whenever you're making records and you're recording them kind of all over the place or with different producers, you're catching different energies and different things are happening that might make the record feel like just a bunch of songs. And I think it's always been important for me to make a cohesive project, which is why, I don't have a bunch of albums. My albums are like Asleep in the Bread Owl, which I did relatively with one producer, Retro Hash, which I did relatively with one producer. I would count Paps and Jazz, which is the record I did pretty much with one producer, and now Flowers on the Weekend. And, I would argue and go to the mat and say those are cohesive projects. Whereas like, the mixtapes and Greenhouse Effect and all that stuff, those are more mixtapes and a lot of kind of just songs. So I think for me, my main intention with this project was just make something that feels good, that kind of showcases where I'm at right now. And I think we've done that.
Cool. So since you haven't had a project, before this one since maybe like 2013.
Yeah.
Let us know what exactly you've been doing, in that time, like what your journey has been.
Well, I mean, mainly I moved home. I was in LA for a while. LA is where I made Retro Hash. And then I moved back to Philadelphia at like the end of, I think 2016, beginning of 17. And then I thought that I was going to hit the ground running, but it takes a while. I mean, moving and uprooting in and of itself. I mean, I thought I would be moving and grooving in 4 months, but truthfully, it takes about 2 years to really get your footing. I mean, this has to do with like relationships, routines, different things like that. I mean, anybody who's moved and uprooted knows that it's a lot. And so I think first and foremost was just kind of the first half of that journey was the uproot, coming back home and getting a sense of home. And once I established that, it was kind of about establishing some good routines. And also just more of the stuff in between. I was writing for other people. I was kind of, and I've always been this way, kind of an outsider in the music industry. I never have kind of given myself over to the music industry. And so I didn't know what my relationship with it was. So that's why I was kind of writing for other people. And we launched Sunflower Philly here in Philadelphia, which is more kind of like politically active, not necessarily, politics in the traditional sense of the word, but just like developing community. It's an outdoor venue that is art, music, and sustainability, allowing kind of like attracting a younger audience, giving them a place to mess up. So a lot of my attention was getting that off the ground. And when I felt like I was in a good place, I was like, I really want to record some music. And so I think it was during the end of 2018, I started going back in with my buddy Rob, and this was on Wednesdays. We just would do it once a week. And I think like, that's why the album feels so healthy, is because it wasn't like we were obsessed with recording music and did 10 songs a day. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like a job. It was just something that we loved to do. So, obviously I like to say that the record was made with love, but yeah, in between the time of the album and just moving back to Philly, it was just doing the little things to make sure I was doing things for the right reasons.
What was it like, you're obviously making a project now and then versus when you first started? Tell us about that Asher at that point in time in your life.
It's funny, man. I mean, like when we first started, I don't even think we knew what we were doing. And there's so much beauty in that. There's so much beauty in like not thinking about the consequences and not thinking about how somebody might perceive your music, or not thinking about like, oh, what are my parents gonna think, or what's my girlfriend gonna think when they hear this. That's what was super cool about the beginning. It was just us hanging out in the basement, kind of doing whatever felt right. And for the most part, the journey has always been about just getting back to that, just getting back to this like carelessness, and not carelessness in regards to just like not caring, but being truthful and being honest. I think there was just not necessarily a moment in music that people heard, but more mentally a challenge in what was like, why am I doing this? And I think you see it a lot in so, like, I know Common's rapped about it. I know Andre 3000's rapped about it, about struggling with, am I doing it for the art or am I doing it for the dough, And so I think when you're young and you're in your 20s and it's fast and it's fun and you're getting attention and stuff like that, it's easy to kind of, get pulled in one direction to just do it for the attention and, the profits and whatever. But it's not even on some righteous virtue stuff. It just never felt right for me. I never felt like I became like a character, and I didn't want to become a character of myself and like, get to the point where you're 40 and you're just like, who am I? So I've always kind of had a very like weird relationship with the music business, the business of music. And but for the most part, lefts and rights and a couple missteps along the way, I'm sure, but I definitely feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Okay. With you, you mentioning like the music business and whatnot, can you let us know what is the one thing that you kind of took away from your transition from being like with Scooter Braun and a major record label into now moving into this space of like independent? Like you're doing a lot of stuff on your own and it looks great. Let us know, or what have you learned in that transition, especially with music business, because a lot of people, these younger artists that are coming out, they don't know a lot. Like they want to be a part of a major record label, but they don't know that if you do it independently with the right amount of people and team, you might be able to get somewhere.
Well, that's just it. You nailed it. It is a team. It's a team sport. It's an absolute team sport, and you need people who care, and they care about your well-being. I know that there was a lot of conversation about like artists and major labels and them not offering health insurance. And I think that's so interesting because we put so much out there and we're on the road, and it's physically and mentally demanding. And there's a lot out there that show that major labels don't really care about you. It is a business at the end of the day. Now, that's not saying don't sign a major record label, don't sign a major label deal, but I think artists should understand how powerful they are, that the music industry doesn't exist without them. It's not the other way around. So I think one main important part for anybody, not just artists, is to understand your value and understand your worth. And I think what's troubling about social media and just industry in general, with everything moving so fast, is how I think disposable people can feel. Because I know that I felt that way. Like, oh, if you don't want to do it, then we'll get somebody else who will. And it makes you feel kind of disposable. It makes you feel like you're not important, but you are. But to go back to your question about what people should know about the music business, is that cultivating a small audience and cultivating a core audience is extremely important. These numbers on the internet, I think, are really twisting our sense of reality. So I know that people feel like they need to have millions and millions and millions of views to be successful. But if you have like 150,000 views or 250,000 views or even 50,000 views, and people are really tuned into what you're doing, you have a core audience, and there's a lot you can do with that. So I would say one is like really manage your expectations as you move. because success takes a lot of different forms, and it looks very different to a lot of different people. So comparing yourself to other people's success is something that's a very dangerous thing to do. And keep in mind that the music industry, the media, they're all in bed together. Radio, touring, all of this stuff is in bed together. So if you're not plugged into that, you're not going to be doing the same numbers that other people who are plugged into that are. So it's like they're going to feed us success stories all day of the Chance the Rappers and the Macklemores and these people who did it by themselves, like, you know, but there's 100,000 other stories of the people who had success on their own terms that didn't have those same outcomes. So I guess that would be my advice, would be have an amazing team and people who care, and it's probably on one hand, and two, manage your expectations and priorities of what you really want out of this. If it's just kind of views and attention, you might be in the wrong business.
Right. Agreed.
It's hard to get that. When you were coming up, Asher, what artists, like, who would embrace you, like, early coming up? Like, which artists really embraced you? Because when I Love College hit, like, you were, that was it. I'm pretty sure, didn't the song go platinum?
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. I mean, and I attest a lot of that to relatability. But, you know, man, I came in the game, you know, looking like Screech Powers, you know, and like with flip-flops on and stuff. And I was in Atlanta at the time, and Atlanta is a predominantly Black city, and there was such a welcoming, just like love while I was down there, because I was being genuine of who I was. And I think having that experience, being in Atlanta, in a predominantly Black city and in a predominantly Black art form, and for them to be like, yo, this is dope, bro, just keep going, you know. And there's some of the videos are online. It's like Akon was down there, Ludacris was down there, E40, and then like all the Dungeon family, like Rico Wade was huge, and being like, yo, you're dope, keep going. So like little positive reinforcements along the way from people who have already been established was such a helping hand. And I really hope people in any art form get positive reinforcement as they go, because it's so important. You know, and when you're just a white kid in from Morrisville, Pennsylvania, getting plucked from your hometown, put into a new city and say, good luck, kid. It's like, if I didn't get that positive reinforcement from the community in Atlanta, I really don't know what I'd be doing. You know, I don't know how far I would have made it, but it allowed me to kind of just be true, make a record like the I Love College record, you know. And then again, that was accepted because it was like, yo, this dude's just who he is, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, that's that Southern hospitality.
It's so real. And it's like, you know, like I was saying earlier, it's the reason why Atlanta and the South in general, like Houston has it too, Memphis, like these areas that they're not on the coast where it's just like a bunch of people are there and stuff. Like, they got to get it out the mud, you know what I mean? And you got to do it on your own. And I think people recognize the importance of community, and it's so powerful. It's so freaking powerful. And like, you're seeing it in, you know, areas like New York and Los Angeles, which have been kind of, not so much LA because it's so spread out, but at the same time, everybody goes there with expectations. But like, I think people who take community for granted and don't understand like that we all are all part of this, you know what I mean? And what I give to you, I'm going to get back, et cetera, or should be that way. I think you see it to be a less rewarding process. So I have a lot of appreciation for Atlanta and the love that it showed me so early on in such a vulnerable place, and like a naive place, to show me like, hey, be who you are. The acceptance they showed me, because Atlanta's got like some real like freaks and weirdos too. It's like super dope. It's like a really diverse, beautiful city. And then obviously you got like Athens and all that down the way. So it was just really cool to be in a place and we can go into this later, but the uproot, you know, when you leave home and you go somewhere else, I think is a very important part of life. I think everybody should uproot once, whether it's for a year or 2 years. But Atlanta for me was really special.
You got something, Kyle?
I kind of wanted to get in some games, but before that, I did kind of want to hear a little more on why Sunflower Philly got started. Like, what was the vision when you guys first started it?
Well, I mean, depending on who you talk to, there's probably going to be varying stories. But for me, I moved into a warehouse in North Philadelphia, and it's pretty desolate. I mean, they're starting to build around here a little bit on the corners, but I would look out my window all the time and be like, man, this would be so dope if this could be a stage, or if like people could gather here, et cetera. And it's hard to not be able to see, but it's just two abandoned parts of land and then my building right here. So it's like, if you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, it's a triangle. And so my building's right here. The tip of the triangle was just barren land, and the base of the triangle was an abandoned refinement building. That building's no longer there, and so my building is just freestanding. And so I would look out and be like, man, it would be so dope. We had it used to be just kind of like a lot with grass on it, and so people would walk their dogs, et cetera, et cetera. And one day, one of the developers, I mean, we had like our little fire pit. We were growing pumpkins and everything. And the developer came through. I guess it's called, I'm not sure what the technical term is, but they test the soil to see if they can build there. It's like restorative, whatever testing. So they came through with like a big shovel, whatever those are called, the forklift joints, and like dug up some of the ground and like ran over the benches we had out there and squashed our pumpkins. And we had a couple freestanding sunflowers. The whole thing was just a misunderstanding, but you know, we had gotten to the point where we're like, yo, what was that all about? Like, why didn't you at least tell us what was going to go on? Like, my buddy who was living upstairs in the building, he had his bikes in a small garage or a shed rather, that they just picked up with a forklift and threw out of the way so they could test the soil. Just this weird mishap and miscommunication. So the conversation of what the heck just happened led to, you guys aren't going to build on this for a really long time. Like, can we turn this into a common area, a common ground, like a park, so to speak? And anybody who lives in inner cities knows that, like, yes, there's parks at the same time, but there's like open air is a rarity. Open air spaces is very rare. So I was crossing the street one night. This other kid was crossing the street. He had a 6-pack of beer. It was a full moon. I was like, yo, let me get one of those beers. He gave me a beer. We were walking through, walked back, and I was just like, man, you know what'd be really dope is if this turned into a park. I wish I knew like the developer dude. And he was like, I'm that guy. He said that he was the dude that was developing the land. So over time, I met a couple people, and this is just kind of threads of life. I met my buddy Christian Rodriguez, who he's from this area, and he's a graffiti artist. He goes by Tame Arts. And I met him at like, you know, another kind of garden art festival. And, you know, I talked to him about kind of how it would be awesome if the walls changed over down there every, you know, 3 or 4 months. And we started to put a little team together of people who had the same vision of like, how can we make this a interactive space of like, you know, kids who come from music and come from art and come from the, you know, wanting to be outside. How can we make this something that they can all enjoy? And over time, it became known as Sunflower Philly, based off of like, you know, sunflowers are pretty resilient. And, you know, it's a seasonal park that is open all year round, but we still get winters up here. So, you know, for 3 or 4 months, you know, nobody's in there. But it's a place where just dogs can come and you can get outside, especially right now. It's really important because people need to get outside for 45 minutes. And yeah, man, I mean, like for me, those 3 pillars, art, music, and sustainability, are just super important to me. So anybody who's interested in that world and is nearby, being able to provide resources on Sunflower Philly, the Instagram, and letting people know where to get free food in a time like right now, or baby diapers and baby food, all that stuff's been really, really valuable. So, I mean, I'm just a big believer in community, and this was my way of kind of of being a part of it.
Right.
Man, when all of this is over, like, and I can travel to Philly, I definitely want to.
Yeah, we got.
You have to.
Bye, I have to.
We usually have the All Love block party, which is would have been, I believe, the 3rd year, maybe the 4th year. 1, 2, yeah, I think this is 3 actually. I can't remember, but yeah, that would be a good time. That's usually in July, but we'll see how it plays out one day at a time.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. So it says that saying that we have about 5 minutes left, 5 or 6 minutes left. But we gotta play a good game. So desiiTee,
cool.
So you've been hearing about the versus battles, right?
I'm not sure. No, it's on Instagram.
On Instagram. So we got a couple of verses. desiiTee, what you got?
I'm just gonna go off the rip, just because over time I've heard your music and there's a lot of samples in it. So I want to do, like, obviously we had Babyface and Teddy Riley. Like, we pick between Babyface or Teddy Riley.
Just how I grew up, and from my household, it would be Babyface.
Okay.
But as I grew older and like learning Teddy Riley and hearing, you know, obviously his influence on Pharrell and everything like that, it's like, it's hard to not appreciate what Teddy Riley has brought to the game. But yeah, just how I grew up, I would have to say Babyface.
Okay.
That's a good one. So I have a Philly edition, a little bit. So Freeway, Beanie Siegel.
Wow, that's tough. I mean, both have been so have shown so much love to me. I remember rocking with Beanie in Vegas and him just putting his arm around me. I'm like, man, you're like the nicest dude. Obviously, to me, Freeway's verse on What We Do is like high art to me. So you know, I just purely off that alone, even though Beanie was on the Roots, one of the Roots first records, I'm gonna go Freeway.
Okay. And no, go ahead, desiiTee.
No, I was gonna take it to some food just to get
okay, go for it.
Because you've been in Atlanta for some time, so you kind of know about Krispy Kreme, and then there's a Dunkin' Donuts. I kind of want to know, which one would you prefer?
I would have to go Krispy Kreme over Dunkin' Donuts. I appreciate Dunkin' Donuts, don't get me wrong, but I think Krispy Kreme is just like, you know, as far as a basic donut, just a nice glazed donut, let's keep it moving.
You can't go wrong.
I'd have to go with that, yeah.
You can't go wrong. But we appreciate you coming on, talking with us today. Definitely, if whoever is in quarantine right now and don't know what to listen to, like, you should have already listened to Flowers on the Weekend. Like, it's the perfect, like, quintessential chill album for you to listen to. So we appreciate that, and we're glad that you're back. You know, hopefully.
Thanks, man.
We were really excited when we seen something come by with Asher Roth. I was like, what the hell? It's been, I haven't heard from him in a long time. I'm so excited. So even to have you, you know, talk with us for a little bit and just let us know what you've been doing. And, you know, even with Sunflower Philly is super, super dope. And so glad to see your growth in all aspects, not even just music, but in other ways as well.
Thank you. And keep up the good work too. I mean, checking in on people. I mean, this is kind of what it needs to be. And again, the support from what I do is just, you know, what I do. But as far as the conversation around it and other people supporting it, it's such a team sport, you know, and to remind a lot of us, and you guys already know this, when you're doing something creatively, it's a sailboat, you know, it's not a rocket ship. So, you know, just hope for those gust of winds. And I appreciate you guys blowing my sailboat along, you know?
Yeah, we appreciate you, man. So this is MadLoveLive, Asher Roth, desiiTee, K-HiSox, and this is
the Rap Hippies.